When my ex-husband's new wife came to me crying, I gave her the proof of his next betrayal. My ex-husband, Jean-Luc, a minister admired by all of France, left me for a young woman my daughter's age. Everyone thought I had disappeared, just an old wife forgotten in bitterness. But they were wrong. They did not know that in my small apartment, I was sitting with old boxes of documents, redrawing the map of financial crimes I had once helped him conceal. That night, his young wife, Chloé, came to me in fear, and I did not turn her away. Instead, I turned her into my most perfect secret agent. And now, I sit here, telling you this story, the story of how I, Éléonore, used the very woman who replaced me to burn an entire empire to the ground. It all began one evening in Paris, in a lavish ballroom that, looking back now, feels so fake. Jean-Luc, my husband, was standing at the podium. The spotlight shone directly on him, making his graying hair gleam like silver. He looked so powerful, and I used to think that a part of that power belonged to me. I stood tucked away in a corner of the room, next to a cold marble pillar, wearing a simple black dress so no one would notice me. I did not need the attention. I listened to his speech, word for word, a speech that I had helped him revise the night before. In my head, I went over the guest list. The first table, on the right, Monsieur Arnaud, a major donor, a man who could not be offended. As Jean-Luc neared the end of his speech, I immediately realized what he had forgotten. He was about to conclude without mentioning Arnaud's name. It was a small mistake, but in the world of politics, small mistakes can cause massive cracks. I did not panic. I just remained calm, glancing quickly at Jean, Luc's young assistant standing nearby. My eyes met hers, then I tilted my head slightly toward Arnaud's table. It was a silent signal we were all too familiar with. She understood instantly. I watched her quickly step up to the stage, like a shadow, and whisper in Jean-Luc's ear. He paused for only a fraction of a second, then a charming smile appeared on his lips, perfectly concealing the oversight. "And of course," he said, his voice booming, "I cannot conclude without offering a special thank you to my dear friend Monsieur Arnaud." The ballroom erupted in applause. Arnaud nodded, satisfied. No one knew what had just happened behind the scenes. No one knew I had just saved him. That was my job for 25 years. To be invisible but indispensable. I used to be proud of that role, used to think it was my quiet strength. I was so foolish not to realize that, to him, I was not a partner. I was simply an unpaid member of his backroom staff. A few weeks after that party, my life was proceeding as usual. At least, that is what I thought. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at a small flower shop near my home, a place I loved because it always smelled of fresh lilies. I was choosing the most beautiful white stems to arrange in the living room, my hand gliding over the cool petals. As I was waiting for the owner to wrap the flowers, my eyes happened to drift to the newsstand right next to the counter, and then I saw it. It was Jean-Luc's face. He was smiling, a radiant smile I had not seen in a long time. His arm was around a young woman's waist. Her hair was blonde, flowing over her shoulders. She was beautiful, and she looked to be the same age as our daughter. Above the picture was a large headline, printed in bold black ink. "The Minister's New Love." My world did not collapse with screams or tears. It collapsed in the absolute silence of a flower shop. The sweet fragrance of the lilies suddenly became suffocating, hard to breathe. All the sounds around me seemed to vanish. I could only hear my own heart beating, a dry, hollow rhythm in my chest. "Madame?" I flinched. The shop owner was looking at me, holding the carefully wrapped bouquet. I did not cry. I just took out my wallet, quietly paid for the flowers, and walked outside. I walked down the familiar street, holding the white lilies, and felt as if I had just died. That evening, I sat alone in the living room. Everything around me was familiar. The velvet sofa, the landscape painting on the wall, the ceramic vase I had bought on a trip to Italy. But I felt like a stranger sitting in someone else's house. I knew I would have to leave soon. I turned on the television, not because I wanted to watch it, but because I could not bear the silence. And then I saw them. Jean-Luc and that girl, Chloé, sitting side by side in a live interview. He wore a dark suit, looking serious and trustworthy. She wore a white dress, looking innocent and pure. They were the perfect couple. The host asked him about me. Jean-Luc looked directly into the camera, his face showing a carefully calculated sadness. Éléonore was a wonderful wife, he said, his voice deep and warm. But over the years, we ceased to look in the same direction. I need someone who can soar with me. Soar. The word echoed in my head. He spoke of me as if I were an anchor holding him back, a burden hindering his great career. He was not just leaving me. He was publicly erasing 25 years of my life, turning me into a pitiful and outdated figure before the entire world. I sat there, staring at the screen, and for the first time in hours, I felt something other than numbness. It was anger, a cold, deep anger, slowly building inside my chest. I left that house with only a few suitcases of clothes and my old leather boxes. I moved into a rental apartment in a different district of Paris, a place where no one knew me. The apartment was very small and simple, just one bedroom and a living room. The walls were plain white. There were no valuable paintings, no Persian rugs, no antique furniture. Just a table, a few chairs, and a bed. And, of course, my leather boxes. I did not decorate anything. I did not buy flowers. I ate takeout from cheap paper containers, sitting alone at the simple wooden table. My phone hardly ever rang. My old friends had disappeared. Everyone thought I was living in poverty and misery, an abandoned woman wallowing in sadness. But no, I was living in a war room. I had eliminated everything unnecessary, all the distractions of my old life, so I could focus on my one and only mission: revenge. In the silence of that apartment, I began my work. I placed the leather boxes on the table and opened them. Inside were not love letters or photo albums. Inside were leather-bound notebooks, carefully organized by year. I opened the first notebook. I turned page after page. This was not a diary. This was the ledger of a double life, the life I had helped Jean-Luc conceal. This page, March 15th, 2015. Dinner with Monsieur D at L'Ambroisie. Discussion of the Seaport project. Envelope was delivered. I remembered that dinner. I remembered the silk tie Jean-Luc wore. I even remembered the nervous look on Monsieur D's face. I turned to another page, in another notebook. September 10th, 2018. Shell Company Medallion Corp., Panama. Transfer of €200,000 from the Swiss account. Note: consulting fee. I knew exactly what that consulting fee was for. Jean-Luc was the face, the one who appeared before the public with beautiful words. But I was the record keeper, the one who managed his secrets. He was a terrible actor, never able to remember his lines, never able to recall the deals made in the shadows. He had forgotten, but I had not. I remembered everything. I bought a roll of yellow sticky notes and a few spools of red thread. I began to work systematically. I reread every page in the notebooks, and for each important piece of information, I wrote it on a small piece of paper. Names of people, names of companies, amounts of money, dates. I stuck those notes onto the empty wall in the living room. Gradually, the plain white wall turned into a dense network of information. Jean. Luc's name was in the very center. From it, red threads radiated out, connecting him to other names, to shell companies, to foreign bank accounts. My living room looked like an investigation room from a police movie. Every morning when I woke up, the first thing I did was sit in the single chair, holding a cup of black coffee, and stare at that wall. To an outsider, it might have looked like a chaotic mess, the sign of a disturbed mind. But to me, it was not chaos. It was a map, a detailed map of Jean-Luc's greed and secrets. And as I looked at that map, I knew exactly where the path to the heart of his empire lay. I knew his precise weakness. After weeks of work, the map on my wall was complete. I had enough evidence to destroy Jean-Luc, but I knew I could not be the one to come forward. If I released this information, Jean-Luc would use his entire media machine against me. He would say I was a bitter ex-wife, fabricating stories for revenge. The media would believe him. The public would believe him, and I would just become a crazy woman. I could not attack directly. I needed someone who could attack from the inside. I needed Chloe. I had thought a lot about her. At first, I hated her too. But then I realized she was just another pawn in Jean-Luc's game, just as I had been. He would use her, and then, when she was no longer valuable, he would discard her too. She was not my enemy. She was my weapon. A perfect weapon. My first move was not a threat. It was a gift. I went to a high-end consignment shop in the Marais district. I knew the place well, as I had sold a few old items there myself. I found it almost immediately. A Hermes silk scarf, with a pattern of keys and chains, in navy blue and gold. Jean-Luc had given it to me for our 5th wedding anniversary. I bought it back. The scarf was still in perfect condition. I went home, placed it in a luxurious box, and tied it with an ivory white ribbon. I wrote a small card by hand. Every letter was carefully formed. To Chloé. Congratulations on your happiness. This scarf was once mine. A symbol of a beginning. I hope you get to keep it longer than I did. Sincerely, Éléonore. I called a courier service and had it sent to the residence. It was not a blessing. It was a curse. I knew it would haunt her. Every time she saw that scarf, she would think of me. She would start to question her true place in Jean-Luc's life. She would start to feel insecure. I waited. I did nothing for several weeks. I let the silk scarf do its work. Then, I made my next move. I went out and bought a cheap, prepaid phone with cash. No contract, no name. It was untraceable. I sat in my apartment and turned on the new phone. I dialed Chloe's number, a number I still remembered. I composed a single, short, and precise text message. Ask your lawyer about the true meaning of clause 8 inches your prenuptial agreement. Then I pressed send. As soon as the message was delivered, I took the battery and SIM card out of the phone, broke them in half, and threw them into 2 different trash cans on the street. I knew clause 8. I had read the draft of that prenuptial agreement before Jean-Luc gave it to Chloé to sign. I had been the one to advise him to add it. It stated that in the event of a divorce, all assets in Jean-Luc's name before and during the marriage would remain his. She would leave with nothing. I did not need to explain that to her. I just needed to plant a seed of doubt. The panic would sprout on its own. I did not have to wait long. About 10 days later, on a night of torrential rain, my apartment buzzer rang. I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Chloé stood there, soaking wet. She wore a hat pulled down over her face and large sunglasses, even though it was pitch black outside. She looked like an amateur spy in a bad movie. When I let her in, she took off the hat and glasses. Her eyes were swollen. She sat down in the only chair in my living room and began to cry. She sobbed, telling me how controlling Jean-Luc had become, how she had spoken to her lawyer and realized she truly had nothing. I did not comfort her. I just quietly went to the kitchen, made a cup of chamomile tea, and took a thin file out of my desk drawer. I placed both items on the table in front of her. This tea is for sympathy for your position, I said, my voice calm. I understand how it feels. I pushed the file toward her. And this file, I continued, is your way out. Chloé stopped crying. She looked at me, then at the file. With a trembling hand, she opened it. Inside were only a few pieces of paper. They were bank statements from a private account in Geneva, Switzerland. I saw her eyes quickly scan the details. The date the account was opened, just 2 weeks after her wedding. The balance? A significant sum. But the detail that killed her last hope was at the very top. The account name, Future Contingency Fund. I let that truth sink in on its own. I saw the color drain from her face, from a tear-stained red to a shocked white. He does not see you as his future, I said, my voice holding no triumph, only the bare truth. He sees you as a short-term investment for which he has already prepared the liquidation. I paused for a moment, then added, just as he did with me. Chloé closed the file. She placed it on the table with a decisive snap. She was no longer crying. When she looked up at me, her eyes had completely changed. The innocence was gone. The fear was gone. All that remained was a hard, cold resolve. I do not need you as a friend, I said, looking directly into her eyes. I need you as a partner. Help me get what I need, and I will make sure that when this ship goes down, you are sitting on a golden lifeboat. She said nothing. She just stared at me for a few seconds, as if weighing the offer, sizing me up. Then she extended her hand across the table. I took it. Her handshake was firm. Our alliance was formed, not with words, but with a silent agreement in the quiet of that small apartment. In the weeks that followed, we worked. I did not see Chloe again. We only communicated through the prepaid phones I had arranged. I guided her step by step. Our plan was simple, but incredibly dangerous. His annual charity gala is the only opportunity, I told her over the phone, my voice steady, emotionless. It is the one night he is most distracted, most off his guard. Her mission was singular. At the exact moment Jean-Luc was on stage giving his speech, she had to slip into his home office. The safe combination is our daughter's birthday, I said. The irony, is it not? He always uses the most sentimental things to hide the filthiest ones. Our target was not money or jewelry. It was a red leather-bound notebook. That is where he writes down the things he would never dare type on a computer, I explained to Chloe. The names, the numbers, it is the heart of his empire. And we are going to rip it out. On the night of the gala, I did not attend. Instead, I sat in a plain, unremarkable car, parked on the street opposite the hotel where the event was being held. The air was a little cold. I did not turn on the heater. I needed to keep my mind completely clear. On the tablet resting on the passenger seat, a video feed was live. An old friend from a security team, someone who owed me a favor, had set it up for me. I could see everything happening inside the ballroom. I saw the elegant guests. I saw Chloe, stunning in an evening gown, smiling and greeting people. She was a good actress. And then, I saw Jean-Luc. He stepped onto the stage, looking powerful and smug. He began his speech. At that exact moment, the prepaid phone in my coat pocket vibrated. I pulled it out. A single text message from Chloe. I am in. I took a deep breath. My heart began to beat a little faster. The play had begun. I sat in the car, my eyes glued to the tablet screen. Jean-Luc was still droning on at the podium. I looked at my watch. 3 minutes had passed. Then 4. My palms began to feel slightly damp. Suddenly, the phone vibrated again. This time, it was not a text message. It was a picture message. I opened it. It was a hastily taken photo, slightly blurry at the corners, but the center was perfectly clear. It was a page from the red leather notebook. Jean, Luc's familiar handwriting was visible. At the top was a date. Below it was the name of a major construction conglomerate, followed by a 7-figure number, and the note, Agreement for the Southport Project. Clear, undeniable. It was the proof. I took a deep breath to keep my hands from shaking. I opened the email app on my phone. I had already composed a draft, waiting only to be sent. The recipient was a famous investigative journalist, someone with the courage to publish a story like this. I attached the photo Chloe had just sent. Then I wrote the subject line. Just 3 words. Tonight's story. And I hit send. I stared intently at the tablet screen. On stage, Jean-Luc had finished his speech. The ballroom erupted in applause. He smiled, the smug smile of a winner, and raised his champagne glass, preparing for a toast. Suddenly, the giant LED screen behind him, which had been displaying the charity's logo, went black. The room dimmed for a moment. There were a few surprised murmurs. Then it lit up again. But this time, it was not displaying the logo. It was displaying only one thing. The photo of the red notebook page I had just sent, magnified to fill the entire screen. Jean, Luc's handwriting, the numbers, the name of the corporation, it was all there for everyone to see. I watched his smile freeze on his face. I watched the arm holding the champagne glass stop in midair. I watched as a dead silence fell over the ballroom while hundreds of pairs of eyes read the words on the screen. And through the screen, I watched the panic begin to form in his eyes. The panic of a king who suddenly finds himself naked in front of everyone. I did not wait to see the police arrive. I turned off the tablet, tossed the prepaid phone onto the back seat. I started the car and drove quietly into the night. The play was over. I drove aimlessly that night. I did not feel triumphant, nor did I feel happy. I only felt a kind of emptiness, the quiet that comes after a storm of one's own making. In the days that followed, the story exploded. The image of the notebook page was on the front page of every newspaper. Jean-Luc de Villiers, the respected politician, had fallen. Investigations were launched. Other secrets that I had arranged to be leaked came out one by one. His empire crumbled to dust. Chloé left France that very night, just as planned. A few weeks later, I received a postcard with no return address, just a picture of a sunny beach and the words, "Thank you for everything." I knew she was safe and had a new life. She had held up her end of the bargain. As for me, I did not go back to Paris. I went to Geneva, where no one knew who I was. I used the very skills I had once used to build Jean-Luc's career to build my own. I founded a consulting firm, discreet, effective. My clients are wealthy, powerful women who need someone to help them navigate complicated divorces. Women just like Celine, who is sitting across from me now. I finish my story. Celine's wine glass is still full. She is no longer crying. She is looking at me, not with pity, but with a kind of awe and a newly lit spark of hope. "So there you have it," I say, my voice calm. "That is how I did it. Jean-Luc took my past from me, but in return, he gave me a future I defined myself." I looked directly into her eyes, which now shine with determination. "Now, tell me everything about your husband. We have a lot of work to do."